Self-care. All right, so let's talk about self-care and self-compassion and what they mean to me, what they mean in general, and how all of the habits I have been building fall under one of those two brackets or both, and where the similarities and differences are. So first, because I am a bit of a linguistics nerd, I did about a third of a linguistics degree through in university. 1 year I was a linguistics major, and then when I switched majors, I basically did all of my options still in linguistics. I just couldn't really see a career in that for me because it was just a little too academic and it's more of a hobby. Anyway, so because I'm a bit of a linguistics nerd, I'm going to make sure I define my terms first. So, first things first, self-care. Self-care is pretty well defined by now. It has a dictionary definition. At least if you Google self-care definition, Google pops up with their dictionary, which is based on Oxford Languages, and calls it the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health, or the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. Psych Central also has somewhat of a definition of self-care, and they call it any activity that we do deliberately in order to take care of our mental, emotional, and physical health. There's even a Wikipedia article in self-care, and yes, it's not the greatest source, but for like broad level sort of starting research, it's okay. Its self-care article is a little less okay because it defines self-care as any necessary human regulatory function which is under individual control, deliberate, and self-initiated. Which is like, Wikipedia, use regular words instead of jargon, because that's just a really unclear definition, doesn't say anything. Psych Central and the Google Dictionary are a lot easier to understand. So, in general, self-care definitions have to do with caring for our own health, often using a sort of holistic definition that covers physical health as well as mental, emotional, and sometimes even spiritual health. Now, what's interesting to me is that a lot of times there's these sort of stereotypes of self-care. Not necessarily, I'm not sure who pushes these stereotypes, because right now mostly I see people reacting to the stereotypes rather than pushing the stereotypes. But, you know, there's that idea of self-care being all bubble baths and drinking tea, kind of like the little opening bit I did of making tea, when really it encompasses a lot more than that. It's generally about everything that you can do to take care of your own health. And ultimately, it includes a lot of things that focus on long term rather than short term. So the bubble bath may help in the moment, but if you're taking a bubble bath twice a day because you just can't handle the stress, you might want to look into some better coping skills that help you not have to rely on bubble baths so much as your only form of self-care. Now, self-compassion isn't as sort of broadly like known as a term, as there is no Google dictionary definition, there's no Wikipedia page that I could find. There is a website called selfcompassion.org though, and it's run by Dr. Kristen Neff, who has a PhD. It seems like her field was moral development, and she studied self-compassion as part of her dissertation or something like that. She has also co-published a couple books. So to me, this kind of makes me think, you know, she's probably a decent expert on defining what self-care is. And I personally like her definition of self-compassion for details I'll get into later. Essentially, what she does is she breaks down self-compassion by looking at what compassion for another person looks like, and then just reflecting that on yourself. So she starts with talking about what compassion is in general, and then for self-compassion, she says, self-compassion involves acting the same way towards yourself when you're having a difficult time fail, or notice something you don't like about yourself. Instead of just ignoring your pain with a stiff upper lip mentality, you stop to tell yourself, this is really difficult right now. How can I comfort and care for myself in this moment? So what I like about this definition is my linguistic nerd part coming through. She does acknowledge earlier on the page that compassion has an etymology that basically means to suffer with. Which brings me to the etymology bit of what self-care and self-compassion mean, because like I said, I'm a linguistics nerd. I really like digging into etymology and seeing how words have developed. So compassion ultimately comes from the Latin com plus pati, to suffer with. And so I find that really interesting. Passion usually gets thought of as not so much of a suffering, but as something that we care a lot about. But for me, I like the suffering definition of passion because it sort of, even when you're talking about something that you care a lot about, it's sort of the thing that you'll put your blood, sweat, and tears and effort into because you are that passionate about it. You will suffer for it willingly and sort of happily. It's a little bit weird, but I like that aspect of the term passion. Care, on the other hand, is an Old English word. It's not a loan word like compassion is. It comes from Old English kyaru. I can't really pronounce my Old English well. But it means sorrow, anxiety, grief, or also burdens of mind, serious mental attention. In late Old English, also concern, anxiety caused by apprehension of evil or the weight of many burdens. So it is a very similar word to pati, of suffering, but it's a little more about like grief and sorrows. And if you go far enough back, it comes from the Proto-Germanic, which is proto-language is basically a language that a whole family of languages came from. So if you go far enough back, it comes from the Proto-Germanic karo, lament or grief. And the more positive forms of care are much more recent. As Etymology Online says, positive senses such as have an inclination are from the 1550s, or have a fondness for, which dates back to the 1520s. Those seem to have developed later as mirrors to the earlier negative ones. So care is this interesting word that initially meant like sorrow, grief, suffering, anxiety, and then over time kind of has come to mean the opposite of that. And it means like warmth and concern, positive light for someone or for something. And that happens a whole lot over language development. So that's enough of an academic headache for editing D and uploading D, because I'm gonna have to put all of those images of the websites that I just quoted and all of the links to them in the description. Anyway, tangent over. I like the term self-compassion a little more than self-care, but I do see there being use for both. For me, self-compassion is sort of the attitude that you need to have, and then self-care are the actions that come out of it. I also think I just like self-compassion better as a term, and because it's a little more dramatic, right? It brings up an idea of like, I don't know. I'm a theater person and I like the idea of a story, and compassion, self-compassion to me is like coming alongside yourself in your struggles, and like struggles are plot, and that's the whole story thing. So anyway, as I said, there's a lot of misconceptions around self-care. It's a lot of times gets taken to mean something that just makes you feel better, and that ends up being a very momentary thing. And I think self-compassion gets misunderstood a lot too, and it ends up sort of being taken as self-indulgence, or just like feeling really like warm and fuzzy and ushy-gushy towards yourself no matter what you're going through. And it's like, compassion doesn't mean that, it means suffer with. Like, no. You have to come alongside yourself in your struggles and in your suffering. Dr. Neff herself says self-compassion is not self-indulgence. You can't be self-compassionate if you don't acknowledge that there's suffering you need to come alongside yourself and move through. You can't forgive your failures if you don't acknowledge that they have happened. So it's all about that sort of balance between giving yourself a break and not being overly critical of yourself, and acknowledging that there is work that needs to be done. And I think it ties a lot into mindfulness and self-acceptance and that sort of stuff, and that's why I really like it as a thing. So let's talk a little bit about self-care, self-compassion, what they mean to me, and how I've been practicing them. So self-compassion to me is the attitude to practice, and then self-care are the actions that come out of that. I personally will talk probably more about self-compassion than self-care in general, because self-care is a much more well-known term, which means that some of the misconceptions are more obvious or more widespread than with self-compassion. It's interesting because I think self-care, in terms of the misconceptions of doing what makes you feel good in the moment, perhaps at the cost of more long-term stuff, I think both of them get a little bit mistaken for self-indulgence, which they are not. They are about doing what is best for you. And so self-indulgence is more like just kind of putting your fingers in your ears going, la 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 la, nothing's wrong, which is basically how I tried to practice body positivity back when I was really into it, which body positivity is great, but the way I was doing it was basically trying to be very sort of self-indulgent and just pretending that I liked myself. Whereas really it's more about acknowledging that you're in a good place or you're in an acceptable place, even if you are maybe in a place where you want to change. So I like body acceptance better than body positivity personally, as a term that I will use for my own attitude. If you're body positive, then like great. I don't want to tell anyone don't practice body positivity. I just prefer, for my own brain and for my own history, to use terms like body acceptance, self-compassion, stuff like that. That was a tangent. Anyway, so self-compassion and self-care, what do I do and how does that look in my life? First and foremost, I find that I am working very hard on trying to have a good sleep schedule. That is the first goal that I've worked on with my extended health team in 2019, last year, when I started seeing them. When I finally went to my doctor, I was like, look, I am having all of these problems with binge eating and emotional eating, and I need some outside help. And one of the first goals that I worked on with the health management nurse was sleep. Now, when I get really busy in theater, my sleep schedule kind of like falls to the wayside because theater schedules are not great. So when my industry starts up again, I may have to have some tough decisions to make, self-care and self-compassion wise, as to where my boundaries are in order to protect my health holistically. But anyways, I know there are a lot of people out there who have various sleep disorders and stuff like that. So like if you have some sort of sleep disorder and just sleep hygiene isn't helping you get better sleep, I'm not going to say, well, you should just have better sleep hygiene, because it's easy to say that. But I definitely recommend, if you are starting down a path of self-care, you look into sleep as one of your first goals to work on, because it is the basis that gives you the energy, both physical and emotional, in order to make other goals happen. There are books that I have read, like The Happiness Project. I think her first project in that for Gretchen Rubin was sleep, and it's just so foundational. And I would recommend, if you're looking for a place to start with figuring out how much sleep you need and what you need to do to get enough sleep. I also mentioned during one of my early check-ins that I had started washing my face. So it's been probably close to a month that I have been washing my face every night. And that is a really interesting self-care thing, because it kind of falls into that sort of, your standard stereotypical self-care thing, like you washing your face and you're taking some time for you. And some people might think, that's a little like self-indulgent to like just take some time for you to like make yourself feel good. But it is also helping with my sleep routine, because once I have washed my face for the night and brushed my teeth, I know now that it's time for me to wind down and start thinking calm thoughts and doing calm things, and it helps me get to sleep better. So it is definitely a proper self-care thing. Plus, I don't know if you can see, I'll come a little closer to the camera. My skin tone is probably the most even it has been in ages. I used to get like really red cheeks, and in some of my earlier videos I actually would have a concealer like here to try and like look a little more evenly skin toned. I am only wearing eyebrows right now, so it's like super cool. And I was looking at myself in the mirror a couple nights ago and I realized that I was like, wow, my skin tone is great, and it's the evenest it's ever been. So that in turn really helps with like self-confidence and with, you know, being willing to put in work in other areas to like better myself and to become a better me. So that is definitely a self-care thing that I started doing in December, kind of stopped due to the pandemic and due to other stuff, and then I started again recently, and it's super great. And now I'm trying to work towards doing the morning skincare too, because then I can put sunscreen on and protect my skin from sunburn. So another thing I've been doing self-care wise and built out of self-compassion is that one of the things I've been working on in therapy and with my health team is goal setting and setting up skills and strategies for coping with emotions in a productive way. This is something I have been working on for so long, and I actually have a spread in my bullet journal at the front of my bullet journal that has a list of different emotions. So when I feel anxious or avoidant or bored or disappointed or frustrated or inadequate or hollow or listless, I think that's 8 I have. I have a couple more that I probably should add. Then I have a list of different things I can do, and really doing that work into what are coping skills and being more consistent with using my bullet journal to track, you know, gratitude and what I'm doing and what I need to remember, because my memory ain't great. It's sort of a side effect of my brain medication, which is another self-care thing, actually taking care of my mental health and admitting that I need to take a medication, and then using my bullet journal to deal with the fact that that's one of the side effects of the medication I take for my depression and anxiety, is that my memory is a lot worse than it was before I started on medication. And so I have been working to be more consistent in using my bullet journal so that I have a written log of, you know, what I have done, what I still need to do, things I need to buy, things that I'm grateful for. Journaling also fits in with this, because if I have it written down, then I can read back and be like, what was I thinking a week ago when I was feeling like really bad? Or the last time I felt really bad, what was it that helped me feel better, so that I can continue building all of these better coping skills and handle all of my emotions better. So that's my like big mental health self-care thing, is journaling in general and having lists at hand and written records at hand of things that I can do, that I have done, to deal with various emotions, so that I can mindfully and non-judgmentally be like, okay, I'm feeling this, it sucks, this is what I can do about it. But I definitely think right now for me, eating nutritiously is the most important aspect of self-care that I am doing for myself right now. And I have talked about my eating story and my vegan story and all of that and the struggles that I've had with binge eating. And for me, making sure that I eat most of my food in sort of nutrient-dense, minimally processed sort of forms that I have cooked from scratch really helps me eat better, to feel better, to have the energy to handle emotions, to handle binge triggers, to reach out for help when I need to. I think a lot of the breakthroughs that I have made come down to the fact that I am keeping track of what I'm eating, and I am trying to make sure that I am eating adequately, but also not overeating. And this is going to be a little bit possibly controversial, because I think that tracking my food in a food tracker is a big part of self-care for me, because it helps me know that I have A, eaten enough, and B, not eaten too much. And so then it cuts down through a lot of the noise, because I'm a very food motivated person. I'm also a very time oriented person, so Like, people will say, I got so busy I forgot to eat. That has pretty much never happened to me. That's just not how my brain thinks about food. Like, sitting down for 5 minutes at the start of the day and being like, here's what I plan to eat, and going, okay, I have some room for snacks if I want them. Or, okay, if I want snacks, it's gonna be a maintenance day. Or, okay, looks good. I even have some planned snacks in there. Should be fine. If things change, they'll change and I'll adjust them. But kind of knowing, taking that 5 minutes to say, this is what I'm planning to eat today, then it takes a lot of the pressure off me to make choices in the moment, which means I can just stick to what I've planned, what I've prepared, and be like, great, here's my food for the day. And I think that's great because it makes me have less decision fatigue. And it's also like supporting my physical health because I am feeling better and I'm having more energy. That and the sleep have really created the foundation for me to be a lot more productive in the past month than I probably have been for the past 6 months before that. And I think that's really cool. And I do follow roughly an 80-20 guideline, not like specifically, sometimes it's like 75-25, sometimes it's probably 50-50, but I try and follow sort of an 80-20 guideline where I try to have about 75 to 80% of what I eat be that sort of really nutrient dense, made from scratch, minimally processed whole food sort of food, and then that allows for 20 to 25% to be a little bit more highly processed or calorie dense but more nutrient dilute, sort of like just food that helps me serve goals other than just nutritional goals. Like, for example, I talked last week or the week before about my peanut butter and jam English muffin that I eat pretty much every night, and how that really fills an emotional well-being need for me, even though it may not be the most nutrient-dense thing I could eat. It fulfills the emotional need for me where I have really struggled in the past for a long time of sort of anxiety around being like, okay, I'm done eating for the day. And I just started eating a peanut butter and jam English muffin because I had the calories left for it, and I just kind of kept doing it. And now it's like I eat that and my body's like, great, we're done eating for the day. I feel calm, I feel satisfied, and it's just kind of like, all right, I have trained myself to know that when I eat my peanut butter and jam, I'm done eating. And so that peanut butter and jam is sort of a big part of my 20%. Like, this is gonna serve a different need for me. And then I still have room for food that serves needs other than just physical. And I really think that it's important to acknowledge that food isn't just about your physical needs. A lot of people get really deep into, food is fuel, you have to eat it for fuel and only eat it for fuel, and if you're ever eating for your emotional needs, then that's bad because you're using it as a crutch and a coping skill and it's maladaptive. And it's like, there are healthy ways to eat. Just because you think something will taste good or just because you think something will make you feel emotionally more satisfied or help with your emotional needs. There are obviously less healthy ways to do that, but I think obsessing over food as just something that meets your physical needs is short-sighted and is less self-care than acknowledging that you need to have space for eating for other reasons. And so that's really what I have been doing for the past month and a half almost, and it's going pretty well. And I dare say it is going better than any other time that I have tried to focus on really eating from a place of, trying to be nutritious. And it comes from being self-compassionate and focusing on self-care and looking at the whole of me and what my needs are and how they balance with each other, how they jive and where they might conflict, where that balance is between, okay, I need to eat this way for my physical health, but I also need to have this space open for my mental health, because if I don't have this space open for my mental health, I'm just going to binge, which is bad for like all of my health. So I think finding that balance and that sort of self-compassion where you say, look, this is a struggle I have. I have a struggle with binge eating. What can I do to help with that? And yeah, so that is why I find eating nutritiously and keeping a digital food log of what I've eaten, as well as a food and mood journal in paper where I just write really quickly what my meal was. So I don't even write all the elements. I'll just say I had oatmeal or I had tomato soup, like the main dish, and how I felt, both physically and emotionally, because that helps me keep in tune with which foods are serving my needs and which ones aren't, as well as like the food diaries for my physical needs, right? Entering it digitally onto Chronometer. That's to know whether I'm filling my physical needs, and then the food and mood journal is to know whether my eating pattern is filling my mental health and emotional health needs. And it's just this sort of very like, I know some people are going to hate the word holistic. I'm kind of a scientific person, and I know a lot of like holistic health can get a little alternative and a little bit like out there, but when I use the word holistic, I mean something to deal with, the whole, as more than the sum of its parts, which I think humanity is. We are as people more than the sum of our parts. Our needs, our health is more than the sum of just, okay, I have this physical need, I have this mental need, I have this emotional need, I have this spiritual need. They all like mesh and blend together in ways that create the whole of our health needs. And so that's why I track my food how I do. I track my calories and my macros in a digital form, and then I track my mood and my thoughts and my goals towards like eating for my mental and emotional needs in paper form. And I have probably rambled quite a bit about food, but I said that this was mostly going to be a video about how eating nutritiously and my eating pattern that I'm trying to build serves as a form of self-care and self-compassion. So yeah, comment down below if you have anything that you think is a habit based in self-compassion, if you haven't really thought of self-care or self-compassion in a way based on what I've talked about here. If you just want to call me a nerd because I really like linguistics, comment on that down below. I would love to discuss my thoughts with people, so I would love comments. I post every Friday an update on how my health and wellness journey is going and how my goals have been accomplished, and some Tuesdays. I am working towards most Tuesdays. Hopefully at some point it will be all Tuesdays, but for now it's just when I have the time and the energy to make a Tuesday video, I will do that. And those are about more broad topics. Like I've done one that's just my story with my health and my weight and my eating struggles. I've done one about veganism. I think those are the only Tuesday videos I've done. I was gonna do a goals video last week. I didn't do it. So today is self-compassion and self-care. I think next week there will be a Tuesday video. I found my old food and mood journal from 2015, and I think it's going to be really interesting to review how I was thinking about food when I thought I had everything together from 2016 onwards. Ever since I started regaining the weight that I lost in 2015, I've always looked back at 2015 as what did I do right that I haven't done since, and my old food and mood journal was a little bit illuminating in some interesting ways, so I think I'm going to review that next Tuesday. So if you want to be notified of those videos when they come up, feel free to subscribe. You might have to ring the bell. I don't know. I never ring the bell on anybody that I've subscribed to, and YouTube will randomly send me notifications when they posted new videos, so I don't know how YouTube's notification system works. It's a little bit weird. But yeah, and I have an Instagram where I try and post every day. Sometimes I don't. I've forgotten for a couple days, but I try and post most days something about how things are going. So if you want the more day-to-day, sort of what I've eaten and what I'm thinking, updates in short little bits with overly long captions for Instagram that nobody probably reads because I am a very wordy person. I'm too wordy for Instagram, to be honest. But yeah, if you want, you can follow my Instagram as well. And like this video if you liked it. I think that's everything. I'm always like really awkward when it comes to all of the YouTube stuff at the end of a video. You probably, if you're still watching, then like, cool. I don't have a bonus for you. I might. Sometimes there's a bonus after I finish the video, but I can't really think of one. So, bye!